So here we're going to look at what if we have two categorical variables. So the data we're going to look at here is in this table where we have 72 chronic users of cocaine. They separated them into 3 treatment groups. They gave one group this antidepressant, they gave another group lithium, and they gave another group a placebo. And then what they wanted to evaluate was whether or not they relapsed. So we have these 2 variables that were collected. One variable is the treatment that was used, so which of the 3 drugs were given, and then the other is if they relapsed or not. So this is combined within this two-way table. This is called a two-way table. It's also called a contingency table. And we get some information here. We get information in terms of a single variable as well as 2 variables. So the margins of the table, they tell us about single variable. So margins are happening on the outside in these totals. So we can see is 24 were given desipramine, 24 were given lithium, 24 were given placebo. So these numbers of 24 coming through here tells us about the single variable of the treatment. It isn't telling us anything about relapse. And then these margins on the bottom here, where it says total of 48, we see 48 people relapsed, 24 did not relapse. Again, it's only telling us about this variable relapse and nothing about which drug was being given. So these margins tell us about a single variable. Then the other part of this table is what's happening in the middle here. So these values in the middle, those tell us about 2 variables. So in the middle, we can see there's this value of 10. That's telling us we had 10 of these chronic users who participate in the study. They were given desipramine and they relapsed. So this number here tells us about 2 qualities. And like this number 6 right here, that tells us that that group was given lithium and they didn't relapse. So these intersections in the middle here tell us about 2 variables. So what we can do with this information is calculate proportions. With the proportions, they can sometimes be called probabilities as well, but it's basically the same act of making that fraction and in the numerator putting what fits the group and in the denominator dividing out the whole group. So if we selected a participant at random, what is the probability that they had a relapse? And what we want to see is happening here, all our information is about if they relapsed or not. So this is in terms of a single variable. And that tells us that we want to look at the margins. So for our proportion, in the numerator, we want the number of people that relapsed, which there are 48, out of all of the participants. So out of 72. Which is 0.6667. So 66.67% of the participants relapsed. Then this next question, what is the probability that a participant did not have a relapse? So again, this is just in terms of a single variable. So we look at the margins and we want to look at how many did not relapse, and that's that 24 out of 72, which is 0.3333. So 33.33% of the participants did not relapse. So these 2 cases, these are called marginal probabilities because they're occurring in the margins. And the idea is that they're marginal probabilities because they're just in terms of a single variable. The next part is going to use joint probabilities. And this is where you're going to see the word and. And what that word and is going to do is connect 2 variables. We want to see 2 variables occurring at the same time. So what is the probability that a participant took desipramine and had a relapse? So there's our 2 variables there. So for our proportion, in the numerator we want the number of people who are taking desipramine and had a relapse, And from our table, we look at that intersection of despermine, relapse. So our numerator is going to be made up of those 10 people in that study. So numerator 10 out of all of those 72 participants, which is a 0.1389. So 13.89% of the participants took desipramine and had a relapse. Then what is the probability that a participant had a placebo and had a relapse? So now we want to find the intersection of these two variables. So we go up to our table, we look at our placebo group and those that had a relapse, and there were 20 of them. So 20 out of all 72 participants, which is 0.2778. So 27.78% of the participants had the placebo and relapsed. So these two scenarios here are called joint probabilities because they're looking at the joints of connecting two variables. So this joint probabilities is this intersection between those two variables. And this is what we can do when we have two categorical variables, summarize it in a contingency table, and from there we can calculate different proportions.